Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. The name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
Hello everybody, a slightly different view to the Cricket Badger podcast today because we've had some technical difficulties on my usual platform, so we're going old school with Zoom, old school, back into the COVID times. But I am, it's a great pleasure to be joined by Jonathan Campion, who is the writer of this excellent book, which is probably the wrong way around on Zoom, isn't it? We need to mirror. Anyway, Getting Out. The Ukrainian cricket team's last stand on the front lines of war. Jonathan, I've been sitting outside reading that in the sunshine, and it's an excellent book. And it kind of comes from two places, isn't it? The kind of growth of cricket in a non-crickety nation, and also obviously with the backdrop of the awful war that's still continuing.
It's the two common threads to my life, really. The first of being connected with Ukraine. I lived there and worked there, and my son was born there. But also being a massive cricket badger. So this book kind of brings together the two biggest parts of my life in one.
As I say, I find it fascinating. Haven't read it all word for word. I skimmed the last bit in readiness for today. But there are a few characters that crop up in this book who, there's two in particular I would suggest that are maybe the founding fathers of Ukrainian cricket. And they both operated in complete isolation of each other for some time. Let's start with a guy called, and apologies if I pronounce any of these names wrong, Cobus Olivier, who is kind of came via South Africa, Europe, Africa, through the Middle East into Ukraine, and was teaching English in a university in Kiev, and has taken cricket basically everywhere he's gone, hasn't he?
Yeah, so Cobus in a previous life was the coach that discovered Graham Smith in Cape Town. Went on to sort of coach the Netherlands youth teams, was offered the Uganda job at one point. So he kind of had a really serious kind of cricketing pedigree in his younger years. Came to Ukraine as kind of a sabbatical. He wanted to find the part of the world where he thought there was no cricket. Just to kind of get away from the game. Little did he know that cricket by that point had been played in Ukraine for 25 years, and it was quite a thing. So Cobus was the man who brought cricket into private schools in Ukraine. So he used kind of softball cricket as a way to liven up English lessons, and he would kind of chuck his pupils the ball in the sports hall they'd catch it while they were answering questions. And then one thing led to another, and there were dedicated girls' teams. So he was responsible for growing cricket in Ukrainian schools, as well as being the kind of the unofficial coach of the national team.
And I mean, the youngsters, the girls in cricket, it's kind of quite striking how he wasn't the only one, but found that girls had probably more of an aptitude for cricket than some of the young lads because of their the activities they undertook when they were young, dancing and gymnastics and stuff. They were very flexible, and therefore kind of the weird actions that revolve in cricket fitted them better.
It's exactly that. And one thing Cobus told me was that had the war not begun, he was pretty sure that within sort of 5 years, the Ukrainian girls team could have taken on South Africa in a match. Ukrainian girls, as you say, tend to grow up playing tennis, gymnastics, athletics, and just have that kind of coordination and strength. And one part of this book I'm really happy about is how many female voices there are. I think roughly half of the stories in some way are about female cricketers and girls cricket. So just a really surprising part of Ukrainian cricket is how just women's cricket was not just on a par with men's, but almost in many ways kind of quite a bit more advanced.
I'm going to read a little passage from your book, if you allow me to. There's no copyright on my words, are there? By 2021, cricket had made such progress in Ukraine that Olivia applied for the country to become a member of the International Cricket Council, ICC, the sport's governing body. While only 12 nations play test matches as ICC full members, almost 100 other countries receive annual funding as associates and play international fixtures under the ICC's umbrella. Cobus Olivier's intrepid group of students, bolstered by some older players and expats from cricketing countries, were about to become the world's 108th national cricket team. Then the Russian missiles came, and it got that close, didn't it? All the films were filled in. They were kind of maybe 2 or 3 months or something away from actually getting the certificate or whatever you get from the ICC, and then Russia invaded.
Yeah, it's the tragedy of it that I think a couple of months after the war began, Ukraine was due to become an ICC associate member, which would have made it kind of an official, recognized national team. They would have had the right to take part in like World Cup qualification. They just got so far. All the paperwork, all the background work that needed to be done. They had 2 cricket grounds that kind of met ICC standards. They had some players that were really good, and they were all set to kind of just enter the very lowest rung of the ICC. And then even when the invasion began, there's parts of my book about that there's Russian tanks attacking Kiev and missiles going off, and these people are still making phone calls to the ICC and just checking last minute, is everything going to plan? So yeah, that's where Ukraine was at the start of the invasion, and hopefully at some point in the future they'll get their ICC status and become a real national team.
Just going back to Cobus, he strikes me as one of my favourite characters in this book, because he just kind of, as I say, takes cricket wherever he goes. And when the war started, he stayed in his apartment. He didn't want to leave his pets behind, did he? But he finally did escape, and he escaped to Croatia. And he lands in Croatia basically with a plastic bat under his arm, sees a few kids walking around and starts with a cricket team there and buys them pizzas, and all of a sudden there's hundreds there. He basically just seems to be a cricket magnet.
He's certainly a character. We spoke a lot as I was researching the book. What else can I say? I'm not sure what I can say, is he gave several interviews at the start of the invasion, and if people had come across Ukrainian cricket before my book, I think it would have been through his story. So he took his dogs out, as you mentioned, to Zagreb. And yeah, so he was the man who organized cricket for Ukrainian refugee children in Croatia. So he organized kind of games in the park for them in the evenings. And then before too long, a Ukrainian lady joined him to kind of translate, and then she became this huge cricket fan as well. So a really, really heartwarming part of the book is these stories of Ukrainian refugee kids playing cricket in a park in Croatia. For them, I guess it was a kind of way of just getting some exercise and running around with their friends and just kind of normalizing the horrors that had happened to them. But also their mums who had come with them from Ukraine had to escape a war zone, sort of, bombs going off and just a real invasion. And for them, the cricket evenings were a chance for them to just kind of give their children to this, the cricket coaches, and they could get together with the other mums around the boundary and just talk about how to set up life in Croatia. And kind of they had a chance to, it was a bit of kind of trauma therapy, I guess, kind of a bit of a social network for them. I think in lots of parts of my book, I do try to explain about how cricket can mean different things to different people and help people in different parts of their lives.
Is that where is it Anna Murochkina comes in? Because she
Murochkina.
Well, you said it far better than me. But she became the first ICC kind of official coach, didn't she? Ukrainian, because she basically just took it on, and unbeknown to anybody else, was doing it by post or doing it online, wasn't she?
Her story is absolutely just incredible. That she again came to Zagreb, Croatia, as a refugee with her young daughter, just stumbled across these little games of cricket in the park, and she decided exactly that, to take an ICC kind of coaching course to learn the game and learn how to coach it. And I think she just saw potential for cricket, especially among young children. These children had horrible traumas from their hometowns, had to escape in a hurry, had to leave their fathers behind, leave their lives behind. I think she appreciated that cricket had this kind of therapeutic effect of just allowing kids to come together, to be children, just run around, hit a ball, throw a ball. She's just an extremely kind soul. And I really hope that people who read the book will kind of just learn about her, and she can somehow become part of world cricket, that people could know her story.
That seems to be one of the threads in the book, is that you're meeting these people who have gone, full in love with cricket, but also gone through incredible hardships over the last couple of years. And it's almost like you're trying to write them in history, because obviously if cricket just disappears, Ukraine maybe potentially disappears. You want these people to be remembered because they are tremendous people. It's
exactly that. So one of my missions in this book is just to give these cricketers a part in cricketing history, because if the war hadn't happened, and if the invasion hadn't happened and their lives hadn't been destroyed, they would just be living their lives as ICC international cricketers, and they would have their Cricinfo pages and names on scorecards and match reports, and they would be international cricketers at the associate level. That's been taken away from them, along with everything else. And I would just love if people reading my book take these cricketers, kind of remember their stories and talk about them and share their stories, because they're just such outstanding people, and so many kind of incredible cricketing stories.
We mentioned then Cobus Olivia, who was come in and private schools and thinking he's the only person who is kind of flying the flag for cricket in Ukraine. And unbeknown to him, you've got Hardeep Singh, who is probably your more traditional kind of expat from Asia, an Indian heritage, played cricket, and he's got the tape ball cricket teams going on in Ukraine, working in complete isolation, unbeknown to each other, both loving cricket and both playing it.
Yeah, so Hardeep Singh certainly is the father of cricket in Ukraine. He came to Kharkiv, a city in the east of Ukraine, in the early 90s. So back home in India, he was a talented cricketer, kind of played for Punjab's youth teams, played schools cricket against Sachin Tendulkar, kind of that kind of level, suffered an injury, couldn't pursue cricket as a career in India. Came to Ukraine to study, but we all know that when you have the cricket bug, you can't shake it, no matter where in the world you are. So he began playing cricket with his friends, just as kind of to stave off homesickness, I guess, or kind of feel connected to India.
Just come in there. I would have thought, I mean, I've never done this, but I'd have thought if you went to a place that was non-crickety, it would almost be more exciting to try and expose it to people that have never seen it before. And obviously both Hardeep Singh and Cobus Olivia met people who had never even seen a cricket bat, and suddenly a few days later we're kind of playing and we're gleeful and smiling and loving the sport. That must be almost more fulfilling than trying to get a team up and running in England.
Yeah, I think the world over, expats from cricket playing countries just tend to set up little cricket groups, in all parts of the world. But it doesn't really take hold among the locals. It tends to just become an expat sport that no one pays attention to. I think what made Ukraine so exciting and so different is the Ukrainians absolutely fell in love with it too, and really wanted to kind of become part of it. So in all the places where cricket was played in Ukraine, it would begin with mainly Indian expats, with an Australian or two as well. But the Ukrainians would see this foreign game being played, kind of guys padded up and the ball being bowled. They would wander over and kind of want to join in, want to play themselves. I think I've lived in Ukraine and, spent part of my life there. It is the Ukrainian mentality. They're not shy or nervous, reserved people. If they see something new, they will want to kind of just want to try it, I guess.
Which one of the coaches was it that was showing the kids the video of John T. Rhodes on YouTube? And when they went out to practice, none of them wanted to bat, none of them wanted to bowl. They just all wanted to field.
Yeah, that was Cobus in the private school. So he showed the kids kind of as you say, videos of John T. Rhodes back in the day, kind of taking his spectacular catches, and they just wanted to be John T. Rhodes. So just no interest in batting or bowling. All they wanted to do was kind of fling themselves around the sports hall and dive and take these catches.
Yeah.
Actually, a common theme of Ukrainian cricket is how into fielding they are. So even people away from that, the older Ukrainians who may not have been the best batters or bowlers, they're all fantastic fielders.
Yeah.
I guess, with a background in athletics again, javelin, that sort of thing, like they have the technique for it. So Ukrainians, maybe not the world's strongest batters or bowlers, but very, very good fielders.
A long time ago now, I used to coach an under-11s team, and the thought of them all queuing up to field, they all wanted to bat, they all wanted to bowl, none of them wanted to field. It was completely the other way around. It made me chuckle when I read that little paragraph. It was good.
Gentlemen, I want to show you my balls. Look at them, they're silky and smooth. Those are their attributes. I haven't given them names. But for some people, smooth isn't enough. They want smoother. They want flawless. They want transcendent. They want perfection. A surface that's completely without friction. That's why Manscaped created the Ultra Smooth package. For men who like their package, ultra smooth. The exfoliator prepares, the clear gel protects, and the crop shaver perfects. Still going. The crop shaver has 3 precision blades as well as micro combo bar and extra wide lubrication strips. So your crown jewels won't fear getting nicked. So if you're the kind of guy who wants to be that little bit smoother, go to manscaped.com. And you could have a package as perfect as this.
Moving on, Hardeep Singh had in Kharkiv set up a ground, didn't he, with artificial strip, and it was a proper cricket ground. It was ICC measurements, so if they ever did get to be international, it was a ground that could host international cricket. So he moved it on in his way. You've got Cobus Olivier moving it on in his way, and then one day, was it Hardeep Singh picked up the phone to Cobus and tried to get have a chat and say, we both do cricket.
I think it was sort of through contacts or through intermediaries, but one way or another, the two men became aware of each other's existence. There was a guy, another Indian expat in Kiev called Tamarai Pandian, and he'd set up this kind of this cricketing culture in Kiev, which was quite corporate in flavour. So they organised the cricket in Kiev was kind of all about the ambassadors showing up, and it was quite a posh affair. So between them, they put their heads together and organised. So listen, we want to take this forward. We want to take cricket in Ukraine seriously. Let's take on the ICC. Let's become a proper national team. Let's go for this. And they, between them, set up what became the Ukraine Premier League, model on the IPL. So in the last, I'd say, 10 years before the war, cricket had kind of consolidated and become a proper setup.
You say in the book that when they first met, they didn't get on. But you don't really go into anything in terms of what was different about them. But they come from very different backgrounds, don't they?
I think I'm biting my lip here about some things that I know and couldn't publish and couldn't put in the book. I try my best to put across each person's kind of personality and character. And I think if you read the book and you read a bit about Hardeep Singh, and I do try to explain a bit about Cobus Olivier, you'll kind of see that they had the potential to kind of clash heads. I guess as many kind of cricket organisations do. You hear about kind of power struggles and stuff like that. So in the main part, cricket in Ukraine was a really harmonious, friendly thing, and it was amazing to put down stories about how friendly it was and how good-natured it was.
And that's where some of the other characters, it's very character-driven, this book, isn't it? In terms of, you pick a person and you talk about how they got into cricket and how it affected their lives and made them, they got a lot from it. I really liked, there's a few people in this book. You've got Faisal Kazim, who was the young doctor, and he picks up, he loves cricket and gets involved. his journey out of Ukraine when the war starts as well, where they all seem to head to the underground to try and walk the underground because they know that that's safe from bombs and from shelling. And all of the all of the kind of Asian expat cricketers, not necessarily all of them have played cricket, but they have WhatsApp groups where they're talking to each other, making sure each other are okay, and kind of almost planning their escape from Ukraine together. And that cricket unifies them, doesn't it?
Yeah, the point I tried to put across was just that when the war began and the invasion started, just the whole life just disappeared, vanished. So the life that 40 plus million Ukrainians and so many other foreigners had in Ukraine just disappeared overnight, and it suddenly became a fight for survival and just life or death. Really horrific. So Faisal Qasim, before the war, Indian lads moved to Ukraine to study medicine, become a doctor, and he was the star fast bowler. He'd been a proper cricketer back in India, all set to take the new ball for the Ukraine T20 side. But at the same time had grown into Ukraine, so he learned the language and traveled the country, and just it was his home. He'd settled there. When the invasion began and there were tanks crunching down the boulevard that he lived on in his university dorm, because he had lived in Ukraine for so long and spoke the language and was settled there, he was put in charge of keeping the other Indian students safe. So he had 200 kind of course mates in a dorm basement, kind of keeping them alive, keeping them safe. It was him who hatched this kind of escape plan to get them first out of the dorm and then out of the city and then out of the country. I just want to come back and say that the book, I tried to tell these people's stories, kind of who they were before the war, what they did at the start of the invasion, and just kind of just give a sense of their lives, because they are such incredible people.
That's where Hardeep Singh comes back in as well, because he's obviously got very successful in Ukraine. He's very cricket orientated. He brings in expats. He kind of helps them into the universities. He doesn't just leave them though. When the invasion comes, a lot of them are living in his properties, in his dorms and stuff around the city. He's in constant contact with them, trying to get them out, and he doesn't really leave himself until he's making sure all of his cricketers have left.
Yeah, researching this and speaking to people, what I was told time and time again is that when the missiles began and the war came to these people's homes, just to a man and woman, everyone stayed behind to protect the people around them. No one escaped with their own life and turned their back on anyone. It was incredible how all parts of Ukraine, all people, they saved lives. So Hardeep Singh, the father of Ukrainian cricket, had all the money. He could have taken a charter flight and just disappeared, anywhere. He didn't. He needed to make sure that all of the students that he was responsible for were safe. And as soon as he knew they were safe, only then did he leave. There's stories of so Ukraine's best kind of homegrown batter, a man called Yuri Zahorsky, was getting on sort of mid-late 50s by this point.
He's another one of my favourites, Jonathan.
I know.
I've got the picture of him in the book. There's a picture section, and he's a big unit, isn't he?
Yeah, big unit, big hitting batter, gentle giant. But when the war began, he drove supplies into the war zone. So you might have heard of towns like Bucha outside Kiev, where massacres happened and absolute atrocities happened. This batter for the national team drove his car into the war, into the assault, brought in supplies, evacuated as many children as he could. Just stories like that, if before the war there were these fascinating kind of quirky cricketers.
But he was shot at, wasn't he? Because he basically had a smaller car. He then kind of borrowed somebody else's camper van or something bigger to try and get more people out. And then he had to leave his car behind because they shot at him. He played dead basically until the Russian soldiers left.
Yeah, but I won't give too much away.
Yeah.
But he exactly
But
that. My book includes.
each of those little moments, though, are kind of almost like films, aren't they? You've had films based on less than what he did, Yuri Zahersky, and you've also got Wayne. You had to help me with the surname here, Wayne Ziyech.
I think it's Czech from how it's
Okay,
written in Ukrainian. So Wayne Czech.
because he discovered cricket, wasn't very good at it. Basically, bought himself a bowling machine, bought himself a big bat, and basically spent all winter smashing the ball back over the top of the bowling machine to get himself better. Found that, as you mentioned therapy, it was stress relief for him because he was basically just butchering this ball around his barn, and then strangely enough, with all that practice, he suddenly started scoring runs.
Yeah, well, therapy, yes. And while we're talking on the Cricket Badger podcast, the Australian man who played a bit of cricket growing up in Queensland, was quite correct, but not a great player. Moved to Ukraine to work in the church and kind of assumed that was it for his cricket. So he kind of, started a new life, forgot cricket completely, settled into life in Ukraine. But the cricket bug wouldn't leave him alone. Played one match in Kiev and returns to be this huge cricket badger. And shipped in a bowling machine into Ukraine in the 19 whatever it was decade it was. Converted a mushroom barn into a cricket net indoors, and turned himself into more or less Ukraine's best batter.
That's some crazy stories, really are. And I mean, just finally, we mentioned. You mentioned the kind of women's cricket and how the potential for that, and that's one of the things that Cobus Olivia says, isn't it? That I think it's him that says, all that unfulfilled potential because of the Russian invasion. What might have been with all of these youngsters that were taking up the sport, and you've got a youngster, Darina Piatova, whose father was a goalkeeper for Shakhtar Donetsk, who stood out amongst the youngsters coming through as being somebody that could hit the ball a mile and absolutely perfect aptitude for cricket, and has been completely wasted to the sport because she no longer plays it.
It's exactly that. So some listeners might know Andrei Pyatov, who was goalkeeper for Shakhtar Donetsk, played loads for Ukraine football team. His daughter was Ukraine's best female player. And, a really good judge of cricketers like Cobus Olivier said that she was, had the world at her feet. So the idea would have been that she could have played in maybe the fair break tournament or, got to that level. But like everyone, when the war began, it wasn't about hobbies anymore or any kind of personal life. It's just all about survival. And then she disappeared somewhere, no one knows where, to safety. The story, I've tried to put together the life stories of, I think, 15 or 16 really, really special people, and kind of put their stories down as best I could. The idea being that these guys might never play an international match, or they might never be in a cricket info report, or be spoken about in podcasts. And I just want people to know them, and perhaps as they're playing as we're playing cricket on the boundary, in Britain and elsewhere, talk about these people and kind of know who they are, because we talk loads about the professional game and the World Cup's happening right now, and we all know about the global superstars who've grown up in academies and touring. But I think we all love these underdog, unknown, hidden cricketing stories from the most, unlikely places. I'm really proud that I've put down the story of these Ukrainian cricketers, because I really want people to know about them.
They all mention as well, when you're talking about their escape efforts and what they did, whether it was to help other people or to basically get people together to escape, they all talk about moments where they thought, this is it. I'm dying here. I don't know if I'm going to be alive in the next hour. I don't know if I'm going to be waking up tomorrow morning. If a bomb drops on me tonight, I'm gone. And they all have that moment, don't they, where, however brave they're being, however selfless they're being, they all have that little kind of, I need to make peace with myself. I need to confess my sins. I'm on my way out.
Yeah, but thank God when I spoke to everyone, they were safe, and their families were safe, and they'd they'd reached safety. But everyone more or less spoke to me about these moments when I can't emphasize it enough that, the streets they live on had Russian tanks and missiles exploding around them and bombs going off and gunfire. And they looked at death, and I managed to put down into the book kind of a few stories of, as you mentioned, like how they felt they were about to die and the thoughts in their head. And yeah, so I tried to, the cricketing side, I tried to make as light as possible. And, I didn't want to make it just a harrowing war book. It's first and foremost a cricketing story and a sporting story. But I do mention things in there about kind of, the moments when people thought they were about to die.
I can't remember which one of the characters it was. Called characters, the human beings. Sorry, but who said that when he was talking to you, he looked at some of the pictures of when they were playing cricket, and it almost made him cry because he thought, "I'm never going to get to do that again." It's horrible, isn't it? These things that people love is just being taken from them. And I mean, in cricket's only one thing, isn't it? Amongst the Ukrainian people, they've been robbed of everything. But cricket's the thing that everybody watching the Cricket Badger podcast, myself and you, kind of relate to as much as anything, and they can't do it anymore.
Yeah, but I think it's easy. We're in Britain. We look at TV footage of the war, and we see bombed out buildings and refugees and the kind of destruction and life stopped and just the horrors. But these are real people. There's 40 million plus people and stories and life stories. They're not just this one split second we see on TV. And I wanted in this book to kind of explain that, before this horrible war happened, everyone had a life and hobbies and, beyond cricket, everything. And for some, by no means was every Ukrainian kind of mad into cricket, but there were several, cricket fans and cricket players. And
got some pictures there. There's a picture of the ground in. You said better than me, but Kharkiv is how it looks on the sheet.
Kharkiv, yeah.
That's the ground that Hardeep Singh kind of put together, wasn't it? Kind of the players on there, and it goes through all of that from them. Nice, joyful pictures of them playing cricket in the park. There was Vitaly Klitschko got involved and set up a summer festival. Part of the summer festival was devoted to cricket, and it was suddenly becoming a big thing, and everybody was enjoying themselves. And then you move on. The last picture is that where they're all crowded into some kind of basement somewhere in a hallway, just trying to survive.
Yeah,
it's kind of, as you say, light and shade all the way through, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same all over Ukraine. So I think this book is about cricket because this is the story I came across. But there could have been a book about the Ukrainian flower arranging team or something. Just everyone had their own niche, their own part of life. And then it all stopped.
I mean, we'll finish with the start, which is the forward by Sergei Rebrov, who very famous footballer for those that don't know, and manager of the Ukrainian football team, which unfortunately went out on 4 points in the Euros just yesterday.
I know.
The only team in recent times anyway that's gone out on 4 points. Incredibly unlucky, but played really well. And they were playing for their nation, weren't they? I mean, in the same way, they're all playing for their nations, but in a way, there's more responsibility, it seems, on the Ukrainians at the moment. I do a lot of tennis commentary, see a lot of Ukrainian tennis players. You're obviously the boxer, the heavyweight boxer, who was kind of flying the flag for Ukraine. It's almost like every punch, every shot, every kick of a ball is not just for them. It's not just for the team they're playing for. It's for the people back home.
Yeah, I think I lived in Ukraine for 3 years. It's always been a big part of my life. And I know that it's a living, breathing culture and sometimes a really quirky place, a place with a T20 cricket side. And I was quite nervous interviewing these Ukrainians because I didn't want to be insensitive by kind of barging in with questions about cricket when they're separated from their husbands and fathers, and it didn't feel right somehow. But I think Ukrainians want the world to know about the country that they really are, what the country really is. And it's a country with, for example, Indian restaurants and stand-up comics and just the normal kind of European life. And I think the Ukrainian cricketers were really happy to tell me their stories because they wanted readers to kind of know what Ukraine is really like and what they really like. And I'm sure it's the same on a professional level for the footballers and the tennis players. You know, I think we all want to be celebrating other countries and learning about the best parts of them.
Well, we are on Zoom today, and we have got a. I don't pay for Zoom anymore because I don't need to because I'm on a different platform. But the time is ticking down here, so we have to bring this to a close. But Jonathan, this is an excellent book. I've been reading it over the last few weeks, and some of the stories in it we kind of only just scratched the surface really of the people involved in this. There's many that we haven't mentioned as well.
There's certainly. There's certainly plenty more cricketing stories in it. So I tried to pack in as many kind of hidden stories from cricket in Ukraine as possible. So there's plenty more.
And from the Cricket Badger podcast, we wish you well with this because it is a very good book. So if you want to buy it, it is available on Amazon, all good bookshops, Pitch Publishing,
all good bookshops, and
the bad ones as well, probably just like the ones I brought out. But I think finally, from my perspective anyway. You know, often the war in Ukraine, it was front page news for ages. It's kind of gone a bit backwards, isn't it? Because other things come on. People got short attention spans. There are people still suffering and people still dying in that country. So if you're watching in Ukraine, if you're kind of escape Ukraine, you're watching this and you're trying to find out about Ukrainian cricket and just reminiscing really. And we wish you all well and safety. And hopefully the war finishes very, very soon indeed.
Absolutely.
Jonathan Campion, thank you very much for being my guest on the Cricket Badger podcast today.
My pleasure. Thank you.